So, when I was younger, 16 or 17 I think, I had an encounter with something strange in the forest near Danbury, Wisconsin. Background on me is I'm 6'4" and athletic. I am a hunter, camper, and martial artist, generally just a survivalist. I was naive and didn't give nature the proper level of respect and basically was a cocky teenager who felt invincible. Our cabin had been on Long Lake in Danbury, Wisconsin. The whole area is forested for the most part. I was there on vacation with my cousin and grandparents. I took airsoft really seriously. I wore full BDU woodland with a camouflage masking. My cousin just wore jeans and a t-shirt. Now, we had a little battle, which I took into the woods where I felt comfortable. We were about 150 meters into the woods when we stopped. Then I decided to tease my cousin. I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." Jokingly, though. Unfortunately, it turned out not to be much of a joke, because I immediately then noticed that the woods were dead quiet, which only happens when a large predator is around. I was on edge very quickly. Next, the feeling of being watched hit hard, so I started scanning the surrounding area. Then I saw it. The whitish teeth are what gave it away. What I saw was at the edge of the clearing, about 40 meters from us, crouched and holding onto a tree with its left hand. It was panting and watching us with its ears up. It had reddish-brown hair or fur, and it absolutely looked canine. In my head, it clicked immediately as something like a werewolf. I said to my cousin, "We have to go," and he bolted. I still had my eyes on it when my cousin started sprinting, but then the creature charged. I could hear it crashing through the woods behind us just as we were making it out of the woods. Once back at the cabin, we discussed it. It's still unclear if my cousin saw it. I told him I thought it was a bear to not freak him out, but I know bears, and that was no bear. I started doing research on these things after my encounter, which brought me to many Dogman related sites. What I saw coincides with other people's sightings. I am now far better about respecting nature, and I am extremely cautious with the forests. If I go into nature alone, I am always armed, but I'd prefer not to be alone. Always trust your senses. I have shared this story in previous places as part of general conversations, but I haven't made an individual posting about it until now. I'm a little bit older than most folks here. I am posting from mobile, so I'll try to be brief and to the point. Also, I need to leave the name of the specific town out, as it would be a dead giveaway to my real identity. I've always been into the paranormal, as most of us that visit these sites are. In January 2019, I noticed something lumbering down my driveway. The window I was looking out faces over and above the drive, if that's clear to you. For example, I can see the roof of a car, but not always the bottom of the tires. But regardless, I can always notice movement. I look out and see what I initially thought was a bear, nose to the ground, kind of shuffling its head side to side, casually walking down the driveway on all fours. Now, a little geographical clarity. I live in town. The front of my neighborhood faces a major highway, but the back is all state game land. I've seen some wildlife, like turkeys, a deer here and there, and every skunk in the county apparently lives on my street. I don't see many squirrels, groundhogs, or chipmunks, though, which is a bit odd if I do say so. I'm not very far from the city of Scranton. It's about 7 miles from downtown, so I'm not exactly in the sticks either. Now, I watch this bear mosey down toward the street, its head lowered. I moved from the living room window to my bedroom window, because that has a full view of the street. And sure enough, here it comes. But something is wrong. I watch this not bear thing stand on 2 legs and casually walk out into the road. I see the pointed ears, the long snout. It's got its head raised, smelling the air. I almost felt pee run down my legs, I was so frightened. This was no bear. I saw it in perfect silhouette under the yellow streetlight. It was either dark gray or maybe black. The yellow light threw off the true color. It stood without effort, looked like one fluid movement. It then walked across the road, casual as you please, and kinda hunkered down in some scrub brush. I'm not sure what kind of brush, but it's like forsythia, all tangled and thick. Then I realized it was looking right into my bedroom. It had extremely blue eyes. I'm not sure if that was reflected light where they were glowing, but it looked right at me. I lost my legs at the moment and sat down directly under my window, absolutely panicked. I was home alone with 5 cats and a dog who slept through the whole thing. I didn't know what to do. My window was a big picture window, and if it wanted me, it could have easily gotten me. Now, I cautiously got onto my knees to peek over the sill, and I lost it. I didn't see its eyes or it anywhere. It seemed to either be moving away from the forest or behind my house, or it decided to rest up in that scrub brush. What I saw under the streetlight, though, is as follows. It was darkish fur, high-pointed ears, and long muzzle. I never saw teeth, or if it did have a tail, but I did see it had hands with long claws. They hung kind of limp at the wrist. If they were fully extended, they would hang definitely as far as below the knee. It walked digitigrade, on dog legs. It looked heavily muscled, but had a tapered waist. It was 7 to 7.5 feet tall, judging from where it stood in relation to the streetlight. It was very non-aggressive, even when I felt it look right at me. Of course, I was terrified, but I didn't get a sense that it was pissed off or that it had been angry. Some people seem to report this, but I definitely did not sense any type of hostility. Thank you again for taking the time to read this. It was a terrifying animal to see. I hope I never see it again, but sadly I doubt that's in the cards. I'll post any further stories in future time. Be careful out there. You never know what's out there waiting. Back around 20 years ago, I was visiting my great-uncle in the region around Kerrville, Texas. At the time, he was living in his first house in the area before he moved to a retirement community, near a small set of trees. Those trees were beautiful, really, as is the hill country. I was staying with him and my great-aunt for about a week when we went out for an evening to walk his dachshund, as we tended to do in the evenings just in general. The walk was uneventful as the sun set, just a normal evening complete with the calls of the doves and other wildlife, and the dog just having a wonderful time. Then, suddenly, all the wildlife went deafeningly silent, and both of us froze, as did the dog. I remember having a distinct sense of unease and fear that I could not quite explain, and the dog looking directly in a specific area near a streetlight. My eyes turning to where the dog was looking, there was a creature loping through there, a dog-like thing about the size of a large Labrador Dachshund hybrid. Save on the creature's neck, there was a head the size of a boar, and the thing was loping up and down in a way that fitted that kind of build. It looked hypnotic in a sense, and I was more terrified than I have ever been with anything else I've ever seen. It gave me a visceral understanding of Lovecraft's idea that things that just look fundamentally wrong are terrifying precisely because the proportions do not fit. That thing was powerfully built, too. The upper limbs in particular were very stout, and the dog remained frozen for another few minutes before we moved back to the house. I'm not sure what precisely that was, or if it was even Dogman, but it convinced me that something like it could exist. The sudden silence that lasted for a few moments even after it left, and the dog just being frozen, without even growling or barking, still sends chills in me whenever I remember it. As my only encounter was something like a cryptid, too, it remained something very vivid in my mind, not just because I know how dogs move. I know what wolves would move like, and whatever it was no natural thing that made any kind of sense. My encounter was in September of 2018. I live on the edge of Sam Houston National Forest. Strange things had been happening for about a month, with things coming to my house, weird noises in the woods behind my house. My wife and I had a dog that was taken by something, which I saw. It just grabbed my dog and yanked it into the tree line. Unfortunately, I couldn't see what grabbed her, but when my wife and I went to find her in the place where she disappeared, there were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no fur, nothing. Like whatever took my dog just vanished. Now, to shorten my story, it was about 4 a.m. one morning. I was sitting on my porch smoking a cigarette, enjoying the peace and quiet. But at this time, it was too quiet. I mean, absolutely no noises. And in this forest, even for 4 a.m., there's always noises. I shined my flashlight around from the back side of my property and then followed up the tree line. I came to the biggest tree directly across from my front porch, and next to the tree was the biggest wolf head I have ever seen looking at me from behind the tree. This head had to be about 4.5 feet off the ground. This thing had the brightest green eyes I have ever seen. Quite captivating, actually. I just stared, slightly shaking with the light in my hand, and after a few seconds, this thing just grabbed the tree with its hand, not a paw, but a hand, and stood up right next to the tree. I was floored. I mean, what the hell was I looking at? I was in shock and completely scared. This creature was gray and was standing there just looking at me. I couldn't move, and I was literally shaking. This thing then took 2 steps toward me, and that's what snapped me out of my trance, and I reached behind me, trying to find the doorknob. I ran inside and woke up my wife and begged her to come outside and see this. Surprisingly, instead of yelling at me for waking her, she said she could tell something was wrong with me just by the sound of my voice. She came to the front door, and I just knew this thing would be gone. But it wasn't. There it stood, and the look on my wife's face said it all. She actually saw what I was seeing. The creature then dropped to all fours, walked down the tree line and back into the forest. I've never been the same since. It left me scarred where I'm afraid of the woods at night and very jumpy of noises and other things. It looked like a giant gray werewolf, which I now know is probably referred to as a Dogman. People need to know that these things are actually out there. Now, I'm not saying people should go out there and obliterate them if we find them, but people should be aware that they exist, and they are out there. Believe me, I've tried telling others, and everyone just wants to laugh and make jokes and think I'm nuts, which makes the people who have encounters shut down and not share their experience. Anyway, that's it in a short nutshell. If you read this, thank you for the time. Take care, and be safe out there. Me and 2 friends decided to go camping in southern New York, up on a mountain. There was a dirt road that runs right down the mountain, and then off of it, there are a lot of smaller road tracks that have some good camping spots. I don't know if you're really supposed to be camping out there or not, but there's a lot of fire pits, so people tend to do it anyway. And we set up our tent and got a fire going. We had a couple of beers, and we're bitching about our women, and the sun went down. We all looked at each other because the woods got really quiet. You couldn't even hear crickets. Everything just went dead quiet. It felt like there was a lightning storm coming because you could feel the static in the air and feel the hair on the back of your neck just stand up. My buddy Jamie started saying he felt like the air was humming, and then all of a sudden there was a really deep bass noise and this bright light in the distance that flashed up and lit up the entire woods. It looked like the light was a real big firework explosion for the first few seconds, but it lasted for probably about a minute before it split up into 2 or maybe even 3 other lights and shot back down into the trees. We could see all the light glowing out in the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind, and it was gone. Everything smelled like it had just rained, but it never did. We didn't know what to do, and we figured we could just wait it out, and nothing else happened. We thought maybe it could have been a meteor or something, so we left it alone and went back to bitching about our women. Kinda dazed, but that was what we did. At about 2 in the morning, we decided to turn in, so Jamie and I went to go sleep in the tent, but our other buddy Dan said he was going to sleep by the fire. An hour later, I woke up because Dan is in the tent shaking us, saying there's something big watching the camp. He said it was about 50 feet from the fire, and he thought it was maybe a bear, but that it was standing on 2 legs, sort of bobbing back and forth like it was trying to get a better look at him. While he was talking, we heard a loud scream. I've never heard anything like it before as long as I've been alive. It sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but deeper, and so loud it made your ears ring. The next thing I remember was hearing 3 or 4 more things come running toward the campsite, and the embers from the fire kicking up and landing on the tent. These things, or creatures, or whatever they were, kept running to the tent and grunting, and then running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or two. The tent was collapsing on one side, and we didn't know what else to do, so we just started screaming as loud as we could. It only took a minute, and then everything was quiet again, so we made a run for the truck as fast as we could, and then we hit the gas. We were leaving when we saw one of those things in the headlights standing in the road. I told Jamie to gun it, and the thing straightened up and puffed out its chest. It must have been all of 8 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over its body except for the front. That hair was white, or maybe yellow around the chest. It looked kind of like a dog, but not really. I know what Bigfoot looks like, but this was way different. It didn't even move when we drove at it. We had to swerve around it or we would have run right over it. We drove back down the mountain to the highway and parked the truck in a gas company parking lot. We were going to tell the cops what happened, but we didn't know if we were camping somewhere we weren't supposed to be, and we had been drinking all night and could not afford a DUI. So we just waited for the sun to come up and sobered up. When we drove back up to get our stuff, there wasn't anything there. Everything was gone. No tent, no cooler, nothing. We've told some of our friends what happened, and they refused to believe us since we'd been drinking. So we just decided to forget about it. If you want to come check it out, I'll take you right to the place it happened. There's still tracks from where we peeled out and lots of big gashes in the dirt from where the tent was, but nothing else. I don't know if it had anything to do with the lights we saw, but it was the weirdest damn thing any of us have ever experienced, and that was no bear. A pack of upright canines attacking a campsite after a UFO sighting would have to be pretty wild. First off, let's address the alcohol. Yes, it's easy to lean back and laugh about how a bunch of drunk dudes saw a monster. But when was the last time you hallucinated from drinking some beer? I'm not saying they couldn't be mistaken, just I doubt that alcohol could make 3 people all of a sudden hallucinate a physical attack by big hairy monsters. Alright guys, that's everything we have tonight. If you enjoyed that, please click the like. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell so you don't miss a single episode just like this.